Colonel, let's shift over to Greenland now. As we speak, Davos 2026.
Aren't we going to talk about Cyprus and Greece and vertical integration and the quadrangular meeting and so forth? I thought you were going to talk about that.
I wanted to talk about those things when I contacted Carol last week. That's what I wrote her. But then I don't know, your president and all his posts about Greenland and
before we leave the Middle East, I think it's worth pointing out that this vertical integration, which is designed to essentially make Cyprus, Greece, ultimately Bulgaria, all the way up to Romania.
You're talking about the vertical corridors, sir, yes? So right. Just to give context to the viewers.
Right, the vertical corridor. This is designed to wean everybody off Russian oil and gas. It's inherently anti-Russian, which is unfortunate because the majority of Greeks, I don't know how the people on Cyprus feel, but the majority of Greeks have historically been pro-Russian. The same thing is true in Bulgaria to a large extent. The Romanians, it may be mixed. Moldova, it may be mixed. I don't know. But the point is, you can't view that in isolation from everything else happening in Syria, Iran, Lebanon, Israel. It's all linked, and it's all part of a larger U.S. strategy. But that U.S. strategy is also inseparable from Israeli dominance and hegemony in the region, because Israel wants to be the hub for the movement of oil and gas and so forth into Europe. It would like to replace everyone else. In other words, nothing gets anywhere or goes anywhere unless it moves through Israel. I think these are all dangerous policies, which with questionable outcomes. But that's clearly the strategy. There's no doubt about it. And that's why I think it should be mentioned, because you can't view that separately from everything else we're talking about in the Middle East.
The new appointment of a U.S. ambassador to Greece, Kimberly Guilfoyle, it is her, well, I don't know how to name it correctly, like her focus, the vertical corridor. It's now this. She's strongly advocating for it.
Yeah, she's arguing it's designed to strengthen cooperation, as I understand it, to combat terrorism, protect critical infrastructure, enhance maritime security, blah, 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 with plans for cybersecurity. And the Great Sea Interconnector project underway for electricity cables and so forth, so on.
Yeah.
That sounds great, but it's very anti-Russian and Israel-centric. Let's be frank.
It is Israel-centric. It is anti-Russian, but it's also anti-Turkish, sir.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
The Turks are in a different position. They could seize one or two islands in the Aegean. Right now, in fact, I can't remember the name of it. There's one island in particular that's only 10 miles or so from Turkey that is still controlled by Greece. It's worth considering right now that in view of our readiness, ostensibly, to seize Greenland, it would not surprise me if the Turks took the opportunity to seize those islands. That would be a strategic game changer in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Yes,
there's not a great deal that the Greeks could do about
it. There's a lot of things underway because Turkey has its own strategic corridors in mind and energy routes in mind. And then you have the other routes underway that are Israel-centric, as you mentioned. I mean, over the last month, since we're going this direction, over the last month, we've seen 3 high-level Cyprus, Greece, Israel meetings, one in Nicosia with the heads of the naval and air forces of the 3 countries, the other one in Jerusalem right before Christmas, a couple of days before Christmas, between Prime Minister of Greece, President of Cyprus, Christodoulidis, and Bibi Netanyahu, and then again in Nicosia a few days later, where military deals were signed between the 3 countries. These military deals involved, oh God, I'm not very good in the specifics, but it involved officially to protect the routes that are gonna go forward. You mentioned the Great Sea Interconnector, which is the electric cable connection between Israel, Cyprus, Greece, and then further up. Then there's the vertical corridor again, which is the supply of natural gas from the oil fields of Israel, Cyprus, Greece, then through Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, and from there They have the pipelines that already supply the rest of Europe that have been cut off, that were supplying the Russian gas. And then we also had the other big project that's underway, which coincided with Prime Minister of India Modi's visit to Cyprus a few weeks before the high-level talks in Jerusalem between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. Prime Minister Modi visited Cyprus, and then followed that visit with visiting countries in the Gulf and Egypt, and that was to promote the IMEC corridor, India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which is a whole. You can say more about that, sir, because that is a huge project that involves all those countries, and it's not just about the transfer of energy; it's the trade and goods and services, rail lines, everything. And these are all Israel-centric. These are all anti-Turkey, as you say, and Turkey is not liking all these projects.
Well, the other issue here, though, is that it is also anti-Russian, which is not necessarily a good thing in my judgment, but there is a great hostility to Russia, unfortunately, on the Israeli right in the United States. So they're happily doing everything they can to undermine, obstruct, or halt Russian influence. The problem that I always have when I talk to the Greeks about this thing is that everybody needs to understand something, and I don't think most people do. Americans do not live in the Eastern Mediterranean. We don't live in the Middle East. We don't live in the Balkans. We don't live in Europe. We live in North America. So a lot of people are quite willing to make themselves dependent upon American military power on the assumption that whatever happens, this global reach that America appears to have is going to show up and change everything and protect everybody. And I think that's a dangerous assumption in the world we live in now, because the world has changed. This is very much a multipolar world. The Cold War is over, even though we've decided to maintain hostility to Russia and to a large extent China. The truth is these countries are increasingly peers. In other words, they are other great powers. We are not the only great power. And as a result, I encourage smaller nations to think in terms of cooperating and working with their neighbors instead of fighting with them. Because you may not see the American military show up when you think it ought to be there, because it may be engaged elsewhere, or we may no longer be engaged at all. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I don't think they're relying so much on America engaging in a standoff with Turkey. They're relying, Greece and Cyprus, on a collective cooperation with the Israelis, because Netanyahu did mention publicly in the statements in the December meeting in Jerusalem with the Cypriot president and the Greek prime minister that regional powers should, I don't remember verbatim how he said it, but he said should let go of the return of their imperial dreams. That's not going to happen, he said. So Israel seems that it's ready to protect its interests in the area, because we're talking about changing regional and global dynamics in a major way in the region that sets Israel as the regional powerhouse. They're not going to let that go.
Well, you've got to keep in mind that Israel's power really rests on an American foundation. If that should change, Israel is no longer the great power that it appears to be. Again, this goes back to our discussion of what's Mr. Netanyahu going to do. Well, he's more likely to act now than later, because he realizes privately he may not have the kind of support in the future, a year from now, that he has today. My point is that everybody in the region needs to be a little more flexible in their view of the world. Tightening alliances sounds like a great way to secure yourself. But increasingly, we live in a world of limited liability partners. Someone who was your opponent yesterday could well be an ally tomorrow. Not permanently, but selectively on a case-by-case basis. These alliances that were formed in the early part of the 20th century were catastrophic. They led to major wars that might have otherwise been avoided, because the members of the alliances automatically pulled the trigger and went to war. That's the worst thing that could happen right now. And I also fear that nuclear weapons, despite our best efforts to suppress those and keep them under control, are likely to proliferate. So you put all of these things together, and I go back to what I was saying earlier. Everyone needs to define their interests carefully and make sure that they have not committed their interests in national security, in survival 100%, or vested it 100% in any other country. In other words, to the extent that you can be independent and self-reliant, you should do so.
Yeah, that's clear, sir. It's hard to do, though, when Israeli interests have taken a stronghold within.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Cyprus.
I understand that completely.
It was very easy for that to happen, being we're a small country, and it's also happening in Greece. So I understand what you're saying, sir. It's very hard for Israel.
Yeah, somebody said to me recently, it looks like the Kingdom of Jerusalem in reverse. In other words, you're getting the Kingdom of Jerusalem, only this time they're not Christians. It's an interesting concept. I had not thought of it in those terms, but Cyprus certainly understands that. And I think you can make that argument. It's now the kingdom of a Jewish state, not a Christian one. So anyhow, it's something that everybody in the region needs to think about. I worry about the automatic tripwire. You were talking earlier. What do you think will trigger this with Iran? I worry about the automatic tripwire that brings people into conflict that they would otherwise choose to avoid. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So now you want to go back to Greenland.
Yes, let's go back to Greenland, because I know Americans and the Westerners are more interested in that matter than our matters here. So, but thank you, sir, for devoting your time discussing.
Well, I would much rather go to Cyprus than to Greenland. Greenland is not a target destination I would ever want to go to.
George is laughing
in the background. I've been close to it. Yeah, I mean, I've been close to it. I've been to northern Norway. I've been to Newfoundland. I don't need to go to Greenland. Just keep this in mind. Since World War II, we have controlled everything militarily, from Alaska across Canada to Greenland and all the way up to Norway. We're already in control. We already have a base there.
Yeah.
There's nothing to prevent us from doing militarily whatever we think we need to do in our interest.
So the
notion that we have to own Greenland is absurd. And then the second thing is the Danes have been good allies. We're friends with the Danes.
Yeah.
The Danes signed a treaty with us. They've been very supportive. If we want to extract resources from that place in the future, we can do it. We can do it jointly with the Danes and others. But keep something in mind. There is no worse place on planet Earth than the Arctic to drill for resources, regardless of what you're looking for. Very expensive. So that's not the driving force here.